So I'm Tracy Belandi, and I'm a program associate with the Wallace Center, Ray Team, and the Pasture Project. And this is Regain's organizational spotlight office hours. So thank you for joining us. For those of you who might not be familiar with Regain, it is the Regenerative Ag Idea Network. And this is a member and partner-driven online community of practice that is designed for all regenerative ag educators, advocates, leaders, practitioners to discuss challenges and share resources and peer expertise, also promote events. And right now we have a lot of members focused in the upper Midwest, but we're hoping to expand that across the country. And Regain makes special mention of racial equity, making sure that we're supporting regenerative ag that honors and integrates Indigenous practices and knowledge, academia, and technology. And so we have office hours coming up also May 26th with technical expert Randy Jackson from Grassland 2.0. But I would encourage you to get onto Regain and see all of the different events, resources, and learning and funding opportunities that may be relevant to you or your organization or your friends, family, and network. Today's topic, Jared Luhman, the Soil Health Lead with Sustainable Farming Association, will be speaking on their Farmer Grazing Training Program. And with that, I'll pass it over to Jared.
I appreciate the chance. Just kind of got asked to come on and share some program that we're doing we're finding success in and that we're enjoying and talk a little bit about it. And so I'm excited to share one that's kind of just launching now and just kind of getting going. We're having some good success and I think we're really making a difference. But before we get into that, a little bit about the Sustainable Farming Association in case you're not familiar with it. This is our mission statement. We advance environmental stewardship, economic resilience, and strong, diverse communities through farmer-to-farmer networking, education, demonstration, and research. We're really just trying to provide all the resources that we can to farmers to make them, to improve their businesses and their lifestyles. We are fortunate, and I think it's been through intentional leadership to have very experienced farmer staff. We feel that gives us a little more, not just credibility, but even just like the ability to understand what our farmers, our members are looking for when we're providing educational opportunities and stuff to them, because our staff ourselves are farmers. So we can, maybe connect with them at a different level and understand some of the things that they're looking for. And so with the exception of a few of our more office staff and stuff, most of the folks in that photo and a few of our staff members weren't able to meet that day, but most of our out and about kind of consulting staff are experienced farmers, which is something that I consider an asset to our team. And I see my screen is blinking on the chat. So if there's a chat that I'm missing that has a question that's relevant, I'm probably not going to have that chat box up all the time, but Tracy or somebody can jump in and ask, just unmute yourself and stuff. I'm not too worried if there's any specific questions. Feel free to ask anytime. I'd be happy to answer them. But something that's kind of unique about the Sustainable Farming Association is we are a membership group, but you don't have to be a member of a chapter to be a member of SFA, but we do have local chapters. And this is kind of a neat opportunity because we have members, I've worked with members anywhere from 20 minutes from North Dakota and Canada to 20 minutes from Iowa and Wisconsin, across the entire state. And that can be really great. We have this great diversity of members all across the state, but by offering these chapters where they're local, regional-based groups that they can meet together, they can work with people in their own environment with their own interests that might be relevant to their specific area and provide some more additional value to their members within that region. And each chapter has its own board of directors that can work to figure out what those goals and what that specific region will best be suited by. We also have networking groups that aren't necessarily regional specific, they're more idea and topic specific. Examples of that, it's like the Ecological Service Livestock Network, where groups of either solar grazers or goat grazing groups for city parks and things can meet and discuss and work to form networks. We really believe in the value of networking, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on the specific TA for grazing program that we're doing. But the more networking that we can offer to our farms, the better, because I think there's only so much us as staff members can provide at some, that at some point really having neighbors and groups that can get together independently to who know each other at a deeper level can really benefit from each other and learn from each other. So offering all the different networking opportunities that we can is something we're pretty proud of. We have a ton of different events, educational events, things that we put on, from our Midwest Soil Health Summit to our annual conference. Those are kind of our big winter events where we bring quite a few people. In the past year, we've really focused more heavily on the online options like webinars and podcasts, and those are all available still on YouTube and our podcast Dirt Rich. Just trying to provide as much kind of that online virtual education that people can get. But we're really looking forward to this summer. And myself, I kind of came in the middle of COVID, so I haven't had the opportunity to participate in as many of these in-person events yet, but I'm really pumped about getting started with some of the field day seasons. We've got a big calendar packed, I think, with close to 30 field days this summer across the state that we're going to be participating in, and workshops and cafe chats, really just all over the place. So those in-person events are great. But and SFA, in addition to these, has always been, our staff have always been available for one-on-one consulting. It's been something that we try to offer, but if you look at the majority of the stuff that we have here, pretty much all of those are large group things or distance things. They're not the kind of one-on-one in-person boots on the ground assistance that some farmers maybe really need, and that can be really important for their growth, especially getting started. But even for those who have been around forever, a lot of times the folks who have been around doing something forever are the very people that need that on-site the most, because they need someone with a different perspective to come in and walk through some of the, to look at the farm a little differently and to walk through some of the steps to improve or change. And so we wanted to offer more in-person, one-on-one boots on the ground training to our farmers that we otherwise weren't able to do. And so we applied for and got some funding from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to put together what we call the TA for Grazing program, where we're just providing technical assistance, one-on-one boots on the ground training to farmers on grazing. The original goal was to work with 20 farmers, 10 farmers in year one and 10 farmers in year two, to really do this stuff that I've got listed here: on-farm assessment, developing of grazing plan, adaptive grazing training, training on fencing techniques and equipment, stockmanship, soil health principles, and then networking. We were blessed by a great response, and we had over 30 people apply in year one. And we vastly had expanded the acre goal that was kind of written into the fund, into the grant. And so we got some flexibility from our funders to work with more people over more areas from outside of the original region of the prairie pothole region that they had suggested. And so we've got now 30 farmers that we're doing this, and we're, instead of doing 10 in year one and 10 in year two, the goal is to work with 30 for 2 years to really provide ongoing assistance to these farmers. And we're pretty excited about that opportunity. And it's been a busy few months trying to get as much done before, for like myself, calving season just started. So I spent most of April on the road trying to get some of these first visits and on-site visits done. But this is kind of just our way of focusing a program on that, kind of what we've been lacking in all of these. We've been lacking that one-on-one boots on the ground education. And so this was our answer to that. And our experience really probably does lie in the grazing. I talked about the farmer staff. With the exception of one vegetable grower, most all of our staff are experienced grazers. And so this was a good opportunity for us to work with people at a level that we're consider more of our niche and our experience strengths. But why is it important anyway? Like, why does it matter to do on-farm stuff, on-farm in person? And I think the biggest thing is just context. I mean, there's so much, especially with this adaptive management, adaptive grazing, that is relevant or completely variable based on context. And so we set aside a full day, and I've been at some of these farms for 12 plus hours now, walking through all of these different things, because how we design and develop a grazing plan, or just a whole farm, whole business plan, it was written and it is designed primarily around grazing, but we're working with farmers to improve, if there's some crop farmers, we're trying to help them with that too, or work how we can integrate the grazing into the crops, and not just look at them as separate enterprises. And these things we wouldn't be able to see or understand if we weren't able to be on site and really walk through. So we spend a lot of time, several hours, just sitting at tables talking about some of this stuff. What are the farmers' goals? What's their goals for their land and their farm? Is it a priority at all to improve the soil? Is that a goal of theirs? And what's their goals for their family and lifestyle? Have they been working, crazy hours and they want to back that off, or are they comfortable where they're at? And maybe they're looking for more to do, and we can add, maybe some other enterprises to add labor to the farm that could be profitable as well. And then also goals for profit. Work with farmers who are kind of in a retirement position, or one farmer in specific, we were walking through some of the different financial options for winter feed costs, and discussed some things about not making hay anymore. And he said, I'm comfortable where I'm at. I have no problem making hay. I enjoy the work. I could probably do it a little profitably, graze a few more cows or something another way, but I'm comfortable. And that's important to know, because if we're gonna, push for one thing without fully understanding what the goals of the individual are, then we're not really helping them. We're just talking and, not really providing value. And so that's important. Also being on site and not just doing these over the phone or over Zoom allows us to see, I've worked with farmers that says, yeah, I bought this farm and it has fence up already on it. And I got there and the fence is there, but it's 75-year-old barbed wire with trees falling on it. And it needs a lot of work. And he wanted to turn out sheep and it was not going to work well for that. Or maybe there's good fence for cattle, but it's not appropriate for the livestock species they want. And being on site, we're able to, help them with that. One farm, when I got there, we worked at a table in the shop for a few hours and looked at a satellite image, and you could kind of look at this whole pasture and see that one area, it looks like there's a little bit dense trees. But until we went out and walked the property, did I realize that was a swamp, and it virtually, not going to be productive grassland by any means. And if we are able to get out and on site and recognize the specific and unique challenges that every environment and every terrain and every pasture offers, we won't be able to adequately design a plan either. Same thing goes for what resources the farmer has. Not only their goals, but do they have a skid loader? Do they have tractors? Do they have ATVs? Do they have time? Are they working full-time off the farm and have a family of 4? And the goal of theirs is to minimize labor on the farm. Do they have off-farm income coming where they don't need to depend on this work? Or are they and do they have the money to invest in infrastructure? Or are we working from bare bones kind of nothing? All of these things are important that we're able to do. And the biggest thing about adaptive grazing is being adaptive. And if we don't understand the context of our farmer, we can't provide that adaptive plan or work with them on that. So many farmers, I think, and I've worked with them where they come and they think in their mind that this is essentially just a rotational grazing plan, where we're going to tell them, build a fence here, 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 and here, and you have X amount of acres and X amount of paddock, 8 paddocks. You move every 3 days, and that just doesn't manage the context. You're not managing individual paddocks for what is unique to that paddock. Maybe one paddock had a tremendous amount of manure hauled on over decades of being a dairy farm there, and the back hillside on the backside is eroded and very unproductive. And if you manage in a certain way, you're going to be overgrazing certain areas and undergrazing other areas, and that just doesn't fit the context. So that's what we wanted to do. We can talk about these things, but especially for farmers who are beginning farmers that maybe don't understand what it means, what they're even looking for in the first place. By being on site, we can walk the property with them and walk through some of the things to look at and some of the things to consider, and help design some plans and kind of framework for managing in the future through that. Yeah, and so training on adaptive grazing. Once we've kind of in our minds developed sort of what is the context of this operation, we can start to actually train them on some of the practices. For some people it's basics, and for some people it's more advanced. One thing that I was kind of concerned with about this program is I was worried we'd promote it and we'd get all these farmers who, like a lot of the times we see a lot of the same people at field days and workshops. They're the people who are always out seeking more information, but they're also the people who have been at every conference and read every book and listened to every podcast. And it's like, how much more can we offer? And I was kind of nervous that that's what we would get, is a whole bunch of farmers who are almost experts in themselves. But we've been very fortunate to get the vast majority of the farmers that I've worked with are at that sort of beginning level, or just looking to improve or start in the first place. And that's where we can come in and offer some of the basics and really make sure that we're not skipping over something. If they went to a presentation on this and we talked about how to calculate dry matter and estimating herd needs and went through it really quick in 10 to 15 minutes, it would be really hard for them to maybe gather that and apply it to themselves. But when we can sit down at a table with them and on paper work through the numbers and kind of walk through the different calculations and estimate herd needs for them right there with them, and when they don't understand something, we can slow down or redo it, and we can use the animals as opposed to using a general 100 cows, 1,200 pound cows or something. We can use, like I've worked down to literally with one person, 2 goats, and 2 goats, and we can use the exact livestock species and things that they have at their farm, so we can make it unique to them and walk through those numbers, and help them with the basics, and talk about adapting to unique circumstances. And we can work with the fencing and tools and techniques that are relevant to their operation. If we're working with a goat farmer, it's going to be very different than a livestock farmer or a beef farmer. And so it just offers that ability to be hands-on, and to be unique to the individual, individualized, I guess would be a good word to put it. Talked about earlier with our organization and chapters, how we really believe in the value of networking. This program, we wanted to build that into it, and not just do the individualized, but also bring together everybody who's getting the same training and going through the same thing. This group of farmers, now 30 farmers large, which is great to be able to bring them together and create essentially a cohort of themselves that are all going through the same thing. And the original plan was for this prairie pothole region, so the design was to have a group of people all going through the same thing, all in the same area, that can meet together regularly 3 to 4 times a year, to really help each other learn and to learn from each other's mistakes. My dad, when he started grazing back in the late 80s, early 90s, he had a group of grazers, kind of a grazing group, that they would go from farm to farm and kind of really provide constructive criticism to each other, to learn from each other, and to get another set of eyes on the farm. And that was something that he always considered very valuable for him getting started. And now I have the joy of going with him to field days, where we'll be at a field day and he'll just say, like, why the heck are you doing this? This is ridiculous. Like, I mean, he doesn't say it that bad, but he'll just call out a farmer, and that's how he was adapted. And I'm just like, oh gosh, who is this? I don't know this man. I didn't come with him, but there's value to that. And that's what we want, is for farmers to be able to work together and to provide something that, education, information that they just would never see walking out on their own farm day after day. And there's so much value to having those connections and those networks. And so now we have it actually worked out quite well that we've got sort of 3 clusters of farmers in different areas of the states that we're hoping to help foster relationships in smaller groups that are more localized too, that they can work together on a different level. We're also going to provide field days through this for the participants, and require them to each attend at least one of the 2 field days per year. And we're hoping to do field days in 2 ways. We're going to have, kind of an idea is to have one field day at a farm that's more further down this path, more advanced, that everyone attending can offer, get more value out of. But we also want to have a field day at a beginning farmer, someone who's really early on this path, to not just hammer him with all of the things he's doing wrong and all the things he needs to do, but provide kind of, a different value to the attendees of walking through the steps of how can we, how do we start? What are we looking for? And then so that individual can have 20 to 30 different perspectives adding value to, his own plan as he develops a plan in his mind of how he's going to build out a grazing operation and a grazing enterprise on his land. So we're hoping to offer, kind of a couple different field days that will provide different perspectives or different values to the attendees and to the actual hosts themselves. But yeah, we just believe that networking is an important piece of it. So I guess I kind of ran through that pretty quick, but overall the benefits of the program is just we have a full day dedicated to each farm that we can go and sit down at a table, walk the farm. We walk hundreds of acres, just different things, and it's great that we can get that for our benefit and for their benefit, and we can provide individualized assistance, on-farm assessment and planning, and farmer networking. That's kind of the goals of this that we felt we were maybe lacking in a lot of the other educational opportunities that we were putting on of just field days and workshops. We wanted to get individualized, and yes, there's a lot more dollars dedicated to an individual, but hopefully those individuals will have more education to be able to provide for their communities and neighbors that they would have than they wouldn't have had if they were just attended a workshop. We're trying to train future leaders in their own communities as well, and do it at a whole nother level. So yeah, I think that's kind of the summary of the program. I don't know if there's any questions on anything in specific. I'd be open to taking them.
I have a couple questions, Jared.
Sure.
Okay, first question, I am curious if you and others at SFA who give this grazing TA, did you take any sort of training course to do this? Or, do you follow any sort of like standardized templates to create these plans?
So it's a good question. We didn't all, we're not technical service providers like NRCS standardized technical service providers. And maybe we should have renamed it or something, so there's not a confusion that we're following some certain guidelines from the state. We do have Kent Solberg, who's kind of a experienced grazing expert, who's kind of helped us design an outline of the things that we walk through, things like that I kind of talked about. We have basics that we help every farm walk through, like we establish dry matter, we talk about how to estimate dry matter in a field. We talk about estimating your individual herd needs and how to make those changes and walking through some of those steps. But as far as a specific plan, like a specific thing, no. Each of us have different levels of education and experience too, but it's not a standardized training program that we went through for a specific training.
Okay, thanks. And then my second question is, again, kind of with the NRCS TSP slant is, how is the SFA grazing TA unique or filling a gap that that's different than what NRCS can offer? And have you gotten feedback from this cohort of 30 farmers that they have used both NRCS and you guys? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So from my experience and from some of the things that I've heard is, and I don't want to say NRCS was doing anything bad or anything necessarily, is that we're just trying to provide more of an understanding and a training as opposed to just a prescription. We want people to be equipped to go out and know what to observe. And I didn't talk about that in here specifically, but observation is one of the biggest things that we want to talk to. We've got kind of a pamphlet that we have given and put together and stuff too, with a list of things that we want them to be observing, and we encourage record keeping and stuff. And we want them to be, not know how to follow a plan, but know how to adapt. And we're trying to train, good observers and adapters based on those observations. So that's, I think, a niche that I'm not sure if NRCS is, I don't think that they're entirely providing, is a training on actually what to look for when they're out there and how to make decisions based on what they see. And as opposed to more of just a prescriptive based rotational grazing system. I know, like I've said, some of the farms that their experience with NRCS, when we come there, they think we're going to tell them, you need to build X amount of paddocks and move X amount of days. and that's not what we're trying to do. And some people are disappointed by that. One farmer, when we got there, this is actually with a different program and stuff, but a different source. We went to a farm to work with on a grazing plan and stuff. When we got there, he tried telling us all the reasons why rotational grazing wouldn't work at his place. It's a low area, there's a river, it floods, all the fences will be washed. It just won't work here and stuff. This isn't going to work. And so then we started talking, well, great, I'm glad you know that, because we're not going to tell you to put up a bunch of permanent infrastructure. And we started walking through this with them. And the challenge is that when you start walking through all of the things that you should be observing for and the management decisions you have to be making, it can be a little bit overwhelming. And at the end of the day, this particular farmer tried telling us, well, can't I just put in some permanent fence and make this simpler? Like, can't I just do 4 things? And so it's like, no, you told us that wouldn't work here. And that's great. I mean, a lot of the times we're finding with farmers is the biggest challenge is not the job. It's getting through the mental barrier of understanding what they need to be looking for and what they need to be doing. And just recognizing that it might take a little bit of training and stuff. They want simpler. They want the agronomist who tells them this is what you need to apply, and the person, this is what you need to put in, and that's not how this works. And so I think that is kind of our niche, is what, and that's why it takes so much time too. Why we can dedicate a full 12 hours to this is that it is so unique to every individual, and it requires so much, just like context related, and it changes throughout the year. It changes year to year. It changes paddock by paddock, and that's what we're trying to help them understand. Is we haven't developed a specific grazing plan for any individual yet. We're just trying to train them how to observe and understand so that they can adapt and make a grazing plan as they go. And we're really encouraging record keeping and reflection is a big part of it too. End of year, what worked, what didn't work, what things did we do, and how did that impact it later on, and how should I adjust for future years and stuff like that. So, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but more just rambling.
No, that's helpful, Jared. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And Aaron has a question in the chat on whether you'll be willing to share some of the documents that guide the farmers through making these observations.
Yeah, I can share it. It's kind of just like it's really just a list of things to observe when you're out there, and a lot of this becomes repetitive and simple in time and stuff. And in an ideal world, every person would be taking down notes every day and every observation they make, but we try to encourage them at least once a week to take some time to reflect and look back and see what improved. And I can share some of the things that we share with them to observe and what things to take notes on. And also just, it can be taking notes, it can be taking photos. I mean, I think this is a huge, our cell phones are a huge asset for us to take, every paddock we leave, take a photo, and so that you can look back and see, did I overgraze that last time? Did I undergraze it? Should I, what? So yeah, that's just kind of one tool that we try to encourage them to use too, and stuff. But yeah, I can share that. Yeah.
Hi, Jared. This is Jane Jewett, and I have some questions about the cohorts of farmers, and maybe it's too early for you to really have a sense of that, but I'm just kind of your gut reaction. How much energy input from the organizers do you think is going to be needed to kind of keep those going? I'm just curious if it feels like it's always herding cats and pushing strings to try to get farmers to talk to each other, or if a little bit of catalyzing on your part kind of gets them together, and then they want to do it.
That's a good question, because we've done other things in the past where we pushed for a cohort, and one specific program I'm thinking of in my mind, and we had 10 farmers, and I don't think any one of them did the same thing. We had a half-acre vegetable garden, a 200-acre grazing dairy, a 300-cow more conventional dairy, everything. And that was quite a challenge to get together a cohort where everybody's on a different page and expect them to provide value to each other. I mean, that was a challenge. I'm excited about this because the vast majority of them are in the same position of, their first time grazing at all, first time maybe adaptive grazing or expanding a grazing enterprise. And so I'm hoping we haven't gotten to our first cohort meeting on this one. The funding due to COVID got delayed quite a bit and we got started quite late. So we've been over the last couple months just trying to hammer out these first visits, and we haven't gotten to scheduling our first cohort meeting yet. We're hoping for July or June or July for that first meeting. But I'm hoping that we can provide quite a bit. We can get a lot more engagement, a lot more involvement when it's instead of 10 farmers and everyone's doing something different, it's 30 and everybody is kind of on the same page. I think that's a hope. What was I going to say? I don't know. No, lost my train of thought. But yeah, that's the hope is that this will be a lot more valuable. Oh, that's we had a contract at the beginning for farmers to participate, less for our sake, but more just like for saying that they will attend the cohort meetings. They'll attend 1 of 2 field days, and it's not like because we're expecting these massive amount of requirements for them, but we just wanted people to be engaged and get the full value out of the program that they can. And so we walk through at the front that it's an expectation of them to participate in these things. So hopefully that they recognize that they're expected to participate and that it's not just an expectation, but they actually gain something from it too. But that's a good point, because those past cohorts have been a challenge when it has been a challenge in the past.
Yeah, and I wasn't polemicizing on past cohorts because I didn't know about those. I just
it's a great point. I'm glad you brought it up. We learned our lesson with that last one too. When you try to bring 10 people all at totally different places and expect them to just, let's just have this great discussion on how we can all help each other, and it's like it was a challenge.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey, Jared, really appreciate you sharing this. I'm sorry I came in a little bit late, so hopefully I didn't miss this. But one thing that I appreciated at the end was, you talked about kind of that investment, higher investment in an individual. So kind of like a deeper relationship, trusting that person, will be an influencer in some way, like over time. I'm curious about how that kind of fits into the program as far as like encouraging that more extrovertedness of like being willing to speak up for some of these practices or some of these efforts that may not necessarily be the norm across the fence line or in their neck of the woods, and that that kind of how to be a visible leader. How do you all kind of approach that as you're selecting folks, as you're working with them, and as you kind of eventually have to step back and kind of push them off into the great unknown?
Yeah, well, that's a really good point that I think we need to be more intentional about. Probably is not just is setting them up to be that leader in their community more intentionally and stuff. But one, I guess, way that we're trying to do that is by helping set up and schedule these field days where these farms can be. And we're encouraging and inviting the participants, but more than just the participants, we'll help them organize and promote it in their communities and stuff too, to get people on site to see what's actually happening on their farms. So they're not expected to do it entirely on their own, but we're providing sort of support in that those field days. But I think that's something we should look at more intentionally, is just how do we train them to take what they're learning and go on. And I guess maybe at the moment, I would say it's more just maybe a hope and a goal is that if we can provide more education, that they'll become better, they'll be better educated and be able to be better advocates in their own community. But we should probably look at that more intentionally. That's a great observation.
Yeah, if you figure out the secret recipe that makes it work, I think we all would be interested.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah.
Hey, Jared, I am curious about the cost share aspect. I know you're not giving out money to farmers, but I just feel like kind of a natural next step would be farmers to say like, okay, now that I have this grazing plan, is there a financial assistance available? And so like, have you devised a plan for that? Is that like, oh, we can hook you up with the right programs at NRCS and hold your hand through that process? Or have you looked at offering any sort of financial assistance or grant or something in the future?
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, we're not providing any assistance, but we do kind of have a packet for every farmer too that we try to and walk through some of the items in the packet. One of those is the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program, the NRCS program, some of the programs that are available to farmers in this area that do offer financial assistance and technical assistance in addition to what we're offering and stuff. So we try to walk through some of the resources available too. That's one of the things that we discuss with every farm. And we're happy to help connect them and walk through that, process with them if that's something they want, but it's not something that we've had to do or done yet. Most people have been able to make those connections on their own with their local NRCS offices and then walk through the rest of it with them.
Cool, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Another question kind of building off of that. I know that probably one of the challenges here is like, where do you stop? How much can you provide and where do you like draw the line with that question about cost share that Megan you're pointing to? I'm also curious about how, like, if it's come up or you all anticipate this like larger question about, finding markets for products, if people are kind of expanding or improving and they're trying to find ways to, move that forward if they don't have that experience of, developing that market and figuring out the logistics. Is that something that has come up in the conversations with folks, either this one or previous groups? And, how do you all see that? Is it kind of point them in a different direction, or do you see maybe a next step here around farmers working together to potentially access, help each other out in terms of getting to market?
Yeah. No, the marketing is one of the biggest questions and challenges that come up with almost every farm and stuff. And it's that, context related thing is of how much time do you want to spend in this and what are your profit goals and what are your time goals? Because I've worked with a few farmers, but one farmer essentially, they want to make a tremendous amount of money without any infrastructure investment and any time investment. And it's just kind of, and that's where the context comes into play is it's recognizing what are you able to invest as far as time and what are you able to invest as far as money and what are your goals for it and stuff as far as profitability. And then I spend a lot of time discussing this with each individual. And some people it's, I'm okay, I've got the time, I want to build a market of my own. And so then, I'm fortunate that my wife and I do that. And so I walk through them individually just with some of the experience and some of the things that we have on that. Some people want nothing to do with that. And it's maybe how do we focus more on the reducing costs and building profitability and then selling on the commodity market to be competitive on more of the commodity markets. And for some people, it might be somewhere in between where they're producing high value product and selling to more of like a TC farms or a regeneration farms and somebody who's aggregated a market and can offer a slight premium, but not all of it. And so I do believe there's kind of different levels for different people, but that's why this importance of context is so huge, that we can help every individual based on what their goals are. And that's the beauty and the challenge of this is I've had, a person who, on 20 acres wants to make a full-time living on it. And I think it's 100% possible, but it's going to look a lot different than a person on 2,000 acres as far as like what they have to do for, marketing and that stuff. So it's absolutely possible, and that is a big part of the conversations. I myself anyway, I can't speak for the others. I think our whole team kind of does this as, holistic management is a big part of it, and recognizing that these are all tied together. Grazing is kind of the way in the door on this, and we spend a lot of time working on grazing management, but a lot of times discuss just how does this all work together? How do your profitability goals and your business goals align with this grazing management? And so we do spend a lot of time on the marketing aspect of it for some individuals. Other individuals, they just want to sell at the sales barn. And perfect. We'll just move past that. Good question though.
I know this is all still early stages, but have you talked about what sort of beyond the 2 years, what your support of this group will look like? Is it kind of a continued cohort, community of practice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hopefully they'll, hopefully I think a big part of this is hoping that they'll create the relationships themselves that, we have to get their permission and stuff, but we'll share contact information. And so people can call up you know, oh, this guy from the, you know, they form a relationship in these cohorts. We're hoping to do some in-person things too with field days, so they can form relationships and they just follow up with people, you know, that they have relationships with in the future. It's not like the program and the funding ends after 2 years and we don't have specific plans designed for that, but that's why we're trying to encourage the cohort now is a hope that the relationships last well in excess of the program.
I have a final question. I don't want to ask too many. Is there things that you've kind of come across in this process that you're like, dang, it would be really great if we had that info. People are asking for this information, we don't have it, or this is a resource that everyone is, you know, everyone benefits from. I'm just curious about like the wraparound support. You know, showing up and being the brain in that relationship is central to that. But I'm sure there's a lot of other information people ask for and information that you all provide. I'm curious about where you see like what are the things that people really get the most benefit from, and are there any things that you just don't have in the toolbox that you'd love to either develop yourselves or, you know, other organizations like those that are on this call or beyond could maybe work on or send your way?
Yeah. Well, and this is, I don't know, I'm not sure if it's something I'm pulling out of my own brain is something that I wish I had more of, or if it's something that I've heard from other farmers too. So I'm not sure if where I'm getting this from, but I think we just need more like data and numbers on like how many cow days, like how many cow days per acre can we get? Because people always ask like, is this profitable and stuff? And I believe it is, but I'd love to say we can graze one cow calf pair for 300 days on 1 acre, and then you can do the like once you know how many animal units you can graze on an acre, and then you can start doing the math based on if you're custom grazing, how many, you know, how many dollars per acre can you generate, and start to compete with other different cropping enterprises. And I think that's just something that's lacking and on our farm in particular and everywhere, is that it's hard to keep the data, and the record keeping is difficult in managing that. And so I don't know, I would love to get more people more financially savvy than me, or more better with numbers and spreadsheets and how to properly keep data. We tried using Pasture Map last summer to keep this data more accurately recorded, and after I took this job, it was going to be kind of my job to do that, and so it kind of fell through, and the data is only good as the person collecting it, I guess, and I wasn't able to really do a good job. So I think there needs to be more. I would love to see more data on actually like what can we get, and it varies totally regionally too, because what I was doing a lot of this work is in West and Northwest Minnesota, and a lot of that, like, it's 8 cows to an acre, and down here it's 1.5 to 2, and so I mean the numbers are totally region specific, but at least maybe even having a better program or a better plan to actually record those numbers so that people can start getting numbers for their own farm. And I think Pasture Map is kind of designing a way to do that, but it's expensive and it's, you know, time consuming, and I mean farmers are so busy to ask them to keep another level of records on that is just a challenge. And then it's also challenging when you start overlapping, like, well, this acre was in cover crops and we grazed it in the spring and then planted it to beans, so how does that, you know, how do you allocate that towards the grazing enterprise? I mean, these are the challenges that we've focused or been challenged with. But as far as increasing grazing lands in the upper Midwest, we have to compete with corn and soybeans, and I wish we had better data to compare and see exactly how profitable we can be and and compete with these other production systems. And yeah, I don't know, that maybe doesn't answer your question specifically, but
yeah, but thank you, Jared, because that kind of mirrors my experience. I think Pasture Map is nice if you're someone who's tech savvy and part of a big enough operation that it makes sense to allocate specific person hours to keeping those records. And yeah, I think there's really a struggle. I just had my local NRCS guy out here the other day, and I keep my own records on a calendar, and he was like, wow, you have records. You know, it's just so hard to get farmers to keep anything. And so even looking at some analog pen and paper type methods might, I mean, you know, everybody wants to design an app, but to get people to actually take it with pencil on a clipboard might get us farther ahead on some of that data collection than the fancy apps. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's something we need to do more thinking about, I think, how to get that data.
Yeah. And I don't know how we can do that, but you're right. We need to, and it's challenging even then too, because you got to know, like our challenge is probably just, we've never, it seems kind of silly, like part of the reason we moved towards less hay and cropping, no cropping, is to improve our time, to have more time allocated towards the cattle to take better records. Well, then I went and got another job anyway, so we're right short on labor anyway again. Now in the same boat, but we got to know exactly how many numbers you have in a specific group, how many animal units in a group at any time, and if your group's always shifting and you got animals moving to different herds and different farms, it can be challenging to keep that. But if there's, and I don't know, that's one of my goals, is to attend Ranching for Profit and really try to figure out and improve more management and record keeping. I think is a huge part that farmers are just lacking, and not to their, nobody's fault. It's just a challenge. So
Yeah, we see some of the same challenges on the produce side, because I'm a produce safety trainer for the FSMA, Food Safety Modernization Act, and farmers are required to keep certain records there, and the ways that they're finding to do it are interesting. Like some will have a whiteboard up in the pack shed and write their records for the day on that and then take a picture of it. So they've got that daily record in photos, and that might be something to think about. There are some interesting ways that are being explored for those regulatory requirement type of records that still make it fairly easy for farmers. But, even there's this different set of expectations from the people doing the training and the farmers on what it's reasonable for them to do. And like the trainers might say, you have to keep all your records in pen. Pencil's not acceptable. Well, if you're out in the field and it's dirty and it's 38 degrees and misting a little bit, a pen is not going to work for you. So, you have to make some choices about whether you actually want the records collected or whether you want them done in pen, because both things are not going to happen all the time.
Yeah, that's a great point. At PFI, Megan, are you guys working with farmers at all on better to analyze this or anything?
Jared, we have just submitted an NFWF proposal to increase our grazing TA,
Okay.
which is kind of why I'd emailed you about your grazing TA program and tuned in today, because historically how we've done it is farmers teaching farmers through field days, events, etc., and we facilitate that. But we also want to step up and fill this gap that NRCS isn't necessarily filling in Iowa. And we also are wanting to pilot an innovative cost share program, which we just wrote an Iowa Conservation Innovation Grant for, to give out $5,000 to 18 to 20 different producers to pay for semi-temporary grazing infrastructure. So essentially it's not permanent fence, it's like temporary fence and temporary mobile water systems. And for $5,000, we think you can get started on 40 to potentially 80 acres. It depends on the materials you need to buy.
That's huge.
So, and we want that to complement the cost share that is available at NRCS for cover crops or for other infrastructure. So that's the approach we've taken. We have yet to actually say PFI gives grazing TA.
Sure. Yeah.
We're not quite there yet.
Yeah. Huh. Well, that's huge. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm excited. I don't know. personal goal for a long time is just I want to prove that on a commodity market without direct marketing, we can compete with crops on pasture. And I think it's possible. We just don't have, nobody has the numbers are so complicated. It's not as simple as bushels per acre times dollar per bushel equals profit. I mean, it's just complicated. So
Yeah, so it seems like there's, so much that we want to keep talking about. So I would suggest, going on to Regain and sharing these resources, maybe in a discussion group. This presentation and the resources will be up in a few days. And I just want to say thank you to Jared for your presentation. I think we all got so much value out of it. And thank you all for joining today. And we'll see you soon.